We're going to work on solving some equations with radicals today. So first you want to isolate your radical on one side of your equation, get it by itself. Then to undo your radical, you raise both sides to the power that matches it. And then once you've got your variable solved for, you need to check your solution. So if we start with this one, the radical is already by itself on one side of my equation. So to undo a square root, I'm going to raise both sides to the second power, which is going to give me 5x minus 9 equals 121. Then add 9 to both sides gives me 5x equals 130. And divide by 5 gives you x equals 26. So if you plug that back into your original and check it, so before you squared both sides back into the one that has the radicals in it, you're going to have 5 times 26 minus 9, and we're trying to see if when you take the square root of that, you get 11 or not. Well, if you actually go through and do it, that gives you 130 minus 9 inside your radical, which is square root of 121. That is positive 11. Looks good. Okay, this one our radical is not by itself, so we need to get the radical by itself before we raise both sides to the third power. So let's add 9 to both sides, and then we have the cube root of cube root of x equals 8. And then we're going to take both sides to the third power to undo our cube root and get x. So if you cube 8, you get 512. So it looks like x equals 512. We need to check and make sure that's not an extraneous solution, one that doesn't work in the original. So if I try it in the original, I got the cube root of 512, which is 8 minus my 9, and that does equal -1. So on D, again, we want to get the square root by itself. So subtract 4 from both sides gives you 3 times the square root of x equals -9. And then before we square both sides, just to make it easier, let's divide both sides by 3. You'll have square root of x equals -3. You could have squared it at the previous step, but then you'd have 9x on the left, which people tend to forget to square the 3. So we've got x equals 9 for our potential solution. If you plug it back in and check it, you're going to have 3 times the square root of 9, so 3 times 3 plus 4 equals -5. Well, 15 is not equal to -5, so that is not actually a true solution. It's extraneous, and this equation has no solution. You'd kind of tell that a little bit earlier because you had the square root of x equals -3, and it's not possible to have a number that when you take the square root of it, you get -3. All right, let's look at another one where we're supposed to be estimating the air pressure of a hurricane when the wind velocity is 54.5 meters per second. We've got this equation, this function that gives us the wind velocity if we plug in the air pressure. So if I have my velocity is 54.5 meters per second, let's put that in for our output wind velocity. And then we're going to solve for the air pressure that this hurricane's got to have to make that happen. So get the radical by itself by dividing both sides by 6.3. And then you get approximately 8.65 equals your square root of 1013 minus p. Square both sides to get your variable out of the radical. And then we're going to have to, let's see, if we could add p and subtract 1013, or I'm just going to subtract 1013, which will give us approximately -938.16 equals -p, and divide both sides by -1. So our air pressure is approximately 938 millibars, I think maybe that's measured in, when we have a wind velocity of 54.5 meters per second.